Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy. Hartwell and I have to apologize for last week because we both forgot that we were doing a show Wednesday morning. So these things happen. Unfortunately, we're a week behind, but that's okay. So good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris. Good morning, everyone.
So this morning we're going to be exploring the not so common forms of authority, the ones that aren't often talked about because they're in the minority. So maybe where we can start, Hartwell, is you can just remind us of what the common forms of authority are.
Sure. I mean, inquiring minds want to know, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
of us who are interested in systems, we don't want to just know about ourselves. We want to know about everyone else. But the reason we haven't revisited it till now is because 92% of the world have one of three authorities. The
Mm-hmm.
emotional authority, which needs clarity over time. Sacral authority, which responds to the energy in the moment, and splenic authority, which is a quick and instinctive form of authority, which
Mm-hmm.
inclines towards quick action and quick response.
Right. So those are the more common ones. So maybe now you can dive into the ones that are not so common. So what types of authorities are not as common and what percentage do they make up?
Well, they make up the other 8, and there are 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's ego authority, which can be either projected or manifested.
Mm-hmm.
There is self-projected authority, environmental authority, and lunar authority, which is what reflectors have. And we may have mentioned that before a little bit when we talked about reflectors, but we'll just revisit it again.
Okay. So maybe we'll start out with the ego authority. So tell us a little bit about what ego authority is and how many percent of the population would be defined as that.
Well, this is less than 1%, Kris. And of course, ego manifested authority would be if you were a manifester. So there's one way to be a manifester and have ego authority, and that's to have channel 2145, the money line.
Show me the money.
Yes. So keep in mind that these 4 authorities have very little going on below the throat. So all the lower centers are undefined. So ego manifested authority through the money channel, these people are here, their willpower is directly connected to their throat. So they do best when they actually blurt things out or say things very spontaneously. Because the not self mind can get in the way of our decision making processes. That's what mostly does for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they need to not try and control what they say and just let it come out of their mouths, and in that way they know, okay, this is what my truth is.
Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between, this is not scripted, but so of the money channel, so there's 21 and 45 are the two ends of it.
Yeah.
So if we had spoke before about the electromagnetic connection. So if one person has the 21 and one has the 45, and neither one of them have the defined throat, then does it still manifest the way that you say? Or do they have to have the defined throat?
Well, I think you're talking about a synastry or a question that arises in talking about the relationship between two people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not going to, if 2 people with undefined throats have one end of either of those channels, it's not going to change your design to be in connection with each other. It just means that you're going to be able to be allies with each other because of you're going to be able to be decent allies to each other because each of you have one side of the gate. And when you're together, you might find that it shifts your patterns of communication, allowing you to speak with that kind of voice. But it's
Uh,
not going to change. It's not going to change your personal decision for.
right.
Not going to change your personal decision making strategy.
Right. Okay, I get it. It was like the part that you said that if they had the defined throat too, and I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So moving along, how does the self-projected authority work, and what percentage do they make up of the population?
Well, before we go to them, Kris, there's the ego. There's the ego projected people as well.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So you can have ego authority if it goes from the ego to the G center to the throat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that would be a projector, and they would be, their defining channel would be the 2551, the gate of the channel of initiation. So these are people who are meant to be very transformative individuals in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But they need to, like any projector, they need to be invited into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they are invited, then they have to ask themselves questions like, what do I want? What is in it for me? Because the willpower is being channeled through that G center. And so they need to make sure that then when they're invited and they get that feeling of, oh, what is in it for me? What do I want in this situation? Then their will either supply the energy or it won't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they will know what their truth is.
Interesting. So if we can then now move on to the self-projected authority, how does that work? And then what percentage is that of the population?
Well, in this case, about 3% of the population have self-projected authority.
Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, remember that the G center is the place of identity. And so the voice of identity, the voice of our inner direction, is speaking directly through one of 4 channels. So there are 4 possible ways to have this self-projected authority. And so what they need to do, it really helps for them to talk out loud to the people in their life, and to discuss with them, what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in that case, then they begin to hear, oh, this is my truth. This is what is right for me. This is what arises out of my identity. And they can tell that. But it makes it helpful for them to speak out loud so that they can hear their own truth arising through their voice.
So they have to hear the truth spoken by themselves before they accept it as true. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because then they have a recognition of the experience that they're having inwardly.
Mm.
Yeah.
So then let's move on to mental projectors. What can you tell us about mental projectors?
Mental projectors have nothing defined below the throat.
Hmm.
So they might have the 2 head centers defined to the throat, or they might have just the ajna to the throat.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have nothing below the throat at all, which means that, remember, all these undefined centers are taking in a lot of information. And so their authority consists of sensing their environment, really being open to sensing everything through their open centers, especially, how does the environment feel to them, which is something that the undefined G center is noted for. How does the environment feel? Am I in a place that feels like the right place for me?
Mm-hmm.
If they're not in the right place, they're going to be with the wrong people, and they're going to be offered the wrong opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's useful for them to visit the environments that are related to the decisions they may need to be making.
Right. Wow.
And then they will get a sense for it. So that's why it's called environmental.
I think you start to see too that people who are so naturally gifted psychically or intuitively, a lot of the definition in the centers can have a lot to do with that, right? Because it's natural for them to feel their environment versus somebody else who has to really work at, settling down, meditating, and focusing on what's going on around them and to feel it. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
There
exactly.
are a lot of ways to be sensitive in the world,
Hmm.
and that's certainly one of them.
Hmm.
Once we, in a sense, ground ourselves through our strategy and authority, then we begin to let go of the conditioning. And then we are less prone to be amplifying the energy of others and then we slowly become clearer mirrors for what it is we're picking up through our open centers.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the last one that we have to dive into is what kind of authority do reflectors have?
Reflectors have, in some ways, you could say they have no authority. I mean,
Mhm.
remember, a reflector chart would look completely, would look
Empty.
not empty because it has the same 26 activations as everyone else, but none of the centers would be colored in. So
Mm.
it would just look like a bunch of hanging gates or dormant potentials.
Yeah, so they're only 1%, like reflectors themselves are only 1%. So
Yeah.
then a reflector being having an authority, is it necessarily this one, or can they also be a common authority as well? Or is
No, they
it
can't have
tied to it?
any authorities that we've already talked about because nothing in their chart, no center is defined.
Right. Hmm.
So what that means for them, the only consistency in their lives is in a sense regulated by the moon. The moon completes the cycle in 28 and a half days. And so it goes through every one of the gates in that time. And so there are going to be times when channels get defined by the transiting moon. And so somebody with lunar authority becomes familiar with, oh, today I'm a projector. Oh, here's a manifesting channel that comes alive. Oh, here today I have a generating channel that comes alive. And there is a repeating sequence that happens every single month for the entire length of their lives.
Mm.
So they can, in a sense, tune into that rhythm and begin to sense when it is best for them to make decisions or advantage the different uh, experience that arises in that predictable pattern.
Hmm.
I mean,
That's
for major decisions, they need to wait a month, a
mhm.
full lunar cycle, in order to really feel it through.
Right. That would seem to me that it would be um, easier or more, you'd be able to figure out the pattern or predict it easier with a lunar cycle than you would with somebody, for example, who's emotionally defined and or somebody who is open to other people's emotions, right? Like I would think that it would be easier to figure that out.
Well, I mean, how easy would it be, do you think, if you'd never heard of human design and you were a reflector trying to figure out who you were? You would be
Yeah.
very subject to the not self programming of the world, trying to be like you notice everybody else around you as being.
Hmm.
So human
That's why human
design,
design's important to learn.
yeah. And that's why we have to avoid generalizing, or even to comparing ourselves with other people's designs
Mhm.
because I might think as a projector that manifestors have it easier than you do, but then talk to a
Mhm.
manifester.
Yeah.
No, they're not gonna give you the feeling that they have it easy.
Hmm.
Um,
Also,
so so
also
it,
depends. Go ahead.
no, I invite you to go ahead.
Well, it was just like it also depends. Doesn't matter whether you're a manifestor, reflector, whatever. Also, so dependent on your life experiences, right? Because every person's life experiences are different. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. There's such an endless variety, and that's why more and more I see this as being true. It's like, what is consistent about you? That's your strategy and authority. That's what will ground you in your body. And as I was studying some human design last night, the founder of design, who brought it to the world, was speaking about. He was speaking to a group of human design students, and he says, "It's good to see you guys. You know, you've been coming to see these lectures for a couple of years now, and I can tell that you have worked your way into the experiment because your bodies are all very much more relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
So as you start following a strategy and authority, changes begin to happen that you may not even be noticing, but people around you will notice.
Right.
You know, there's a new sense of being present to yourself that can
Mm-hmm.
arise from that."
Fabulous. And that's what we're all here to do, is to evolve. So that's a good thing. So for this week, I guess we've pretty much covered who the not so common types of authorities are. And next week, we actually have an agenda again. So we can let you know that
Chris is happy.
I'm happy. So next week we'll be going into the definitions in human design and going in and explaining what some of them are. So if you'd like to know more about that, join us next Wednesday at 9 a.m. here on Inspired Energy and Clarity, and we'd be happy to dive into that. Thank you, Hartwell, for your wisdom as always.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Have a magical day, and God bless everybody.